Welcome back to my workshop. Now today I'd like to talk to you about a recent purchase I've made and that's this, which is the Record Power SC4 professional geared scroll chuck package. Now this is basically a new chuck for my lathe. For those who watch my channel, you'll know that I do a bit of wood turning. I'm not a wood turner and I'm definitely not a professional, but I do turn things on the lathe occasionally. Now this is to replace my old chuck, which is this little fella here, which is becoming a bit too small for what I want to do with it. Okay, so I've gone out and bought this SC4 from Record Power. It cost me, with the VAT and everything and an insert, it cost me about £160. Okay, so that's about how much it cost. If you're not into wood turning at all, this may be of interest just in case you want to become interested. This I think is, although it's a professional, it should be a good starting point I think if you want to get yourself a decent grown-up chuck. Right, let's have a look in the package. Right, so we paid our money and we've got our chuck, and what we've got here is a Record Power SC4 professional geared scrolled chuck package. Now in this package you also get this faceplate and you also get some other accessories. So let's get it out of the box and I'll show you exactly what we need. What we've got is a nice little package, but I think once the chuck is assembled, you're not going to be able to put it back in here. But in theory, it'll be on your lathe anyway. So let's open the box and see what we got. Okay, so straight away we've got the chuck, which is very greasy. We've got an Allen key. We've got the faceplate. We have a big C-type spanner. We have the jaws. We have a worm screw and some grub screws and fixing screws and an instruction book. Okay, that's what you get in the package. Let me get all of these out of the bags. Now all of these are covered in oil, obviously to preserve them and protect them while they're being stored. So let me get these out of the packages and give them a wipe down. Okay, so we've now got all these wiped down quickly. I haven't degreased them at all, I've just wiped them down because they were quite oily. Right, first thing, the chuck. Now this is lovely. Okay, the first thing you notice is how well machined it is. The whole thing is really well engineered. Okay, but it's quite heavy. In comparison to my old chuck, this one is a lot heavier and a lot larger. Okay, let's just give you an idea. Weigh them. Now that's my original chuck with the chuck jaws on it, and that's 1208. Now the SC4 without the jaws is 1498. Okay, so it's a lot heavier, which can only be a good thing. Yes, very well machined, and if you look on it here, obviously you've got the mounting points for the jaws. It's got Record Power SC4 written on here. Here you've actually got the scroll tightening, which you use this Allen key for. We'll look at that in a moment. Okay, and also on each set of jaws here you have a number. Okay, and that is for tying it up with the jaws when you fit them. Okay, but overall really nice. Okay, also on the back here you've actually got some indexing marks. Now I'll probably never use those, but you never know. Okay, so this is obviously for having it in a certain position on the lathe. I may not use those, but you know, they're a handy thing to have. Also with the SC4, it differs from the SC3 because it's got this cover on the back to stop dust getting inside the chuck. Now I don't think it was a particular problem on the SC3, but again, it's a very nice thing to have. And here there's some access holes. This one in particular here, you put a grub screw in here to hold the adapter in here. I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, but overall that's fantastic. The jaws, okay, now these are the jaws that come with it. These look like a really handy set of jaws, slightly bigger than on my old chuck, but you can get all sorts of jaws for this particular chuck. There's loads here, I'll show you, and all sorts of adapter plates, so you're never going to be short of options. Okay, so that's the jaws, that's the chuck. You get this C-type spanner. Now this is used for the adapter ring. Again, when I'm mounting it on the lathe, I shall show you how that works. You get a worm screw, which actually fits directly into the chuck. Okay, so you don't have to muck about changing the chuck whenever you want to mount something with the worm screw. And finally, over here, you've got this faceplate, which I like this system. You can actually screw this to a piece of wood and then mount it directly to the jaws. So again, you don't have to change the chuck when you're using a separate faceplate. Okay, I'll show you all these things. You get 8 screws. I've actually got 9, I've got a spare one. You get a teeny tiny little piece of leather here. That's for protecting the grub screw. Well, it's not for protecting the grub screw, it's for protecting the thread on the adapter. Okay, and I'll show you that in a minute. Actually, that's also for mounting the chuck to the lathe, just in case you want to run it in reverse for sanding. Okay, I won't do that because my lathe doesn't work in reverse. Right, so that's all our bits and pieces. So I think the first thing we've got to do is mount the jaws onto the chuck. So it's a simple process of mounting the jaws to the chuck. I'm going to try and do this looking through the camera, which is a bit awkward. But on the chuck, you have these indexing numbers, okay, 3, 4, 1. Okay, and they correspond on the jaws here. You can see there's a number 1. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so obviously 1 here, this goes on here. Okay, and it's a simple process of, they supply an Allen key. Okay, put your screw in the hole and just tighten it down. Okay, at this point, don't tighten it fully. I'll show you why in a moment. Okay, repeat that process for the others. So this is 4, 3, 2. Okay, so they're all in there. None of this is tight. Now the reason I said don't tighten them is because what is a good idea to do is actually close the chuck up. Okay, so they're all touching. Okay, and that makes sure that they're actually all flush when it's fully closed. Okay, then you can nip these up. You don't have to over tighten them, they're not going anywhere. Okay, and just giving them a nip. Okay, so they're all now tight. So if I open this, okay, and then close it again, you should see that they all actually close flush with each other nicely. Okay, that's nicely engineered. and it works a treat. Okay, so that's the jaws now mounted to the chuck. Just to demonstrate this faceplate here, all you do is you screw this to a piece of wood, then that sits on your chuck, and you actually open the jaws, and if you watch, it will centralise. Okay, now that's solidly mounted on there. Okay, then you can turn your whatever you need to turn, and then tighten it up again, which releases the faceplate. Okay, excellent system there. I like that. Can't wait to use that. Right, that's that. Now the worm screw, which is this little fella. Okay, all you do with this is you drill a hole in your piece of wood, this diameter, or slightly smaller than this, and then this can be mounted directly into your chuck. Okay, it has got flats on it. Okay, so that saves you changing your chuck when you want to mount the worm screw. Okay, again, an excellent idea, well thought out. Again, looking forward to using that. Right, now to get this onto my lathe, I need an adapter. Okay, so the main thread in the body of the chuck is obviously a lot larger than I have on my lathe. Let's swing you around so you can see my lathe. Okay, there's my lathe, there's the spindle there. Obviously this is just way too big, okay, doesn't work. Okay, so to mount this onto my lathe, I obviously need an adapter. Now I've already bought one, but just to run you through the process to find out how to get the correct one. If you look in the instruction booklet, it does actually list the part numbers for all of the adapters that they do. Okay, now I know in my case it's a 3/4 by 16 TPI. Now what does that mean? Okay, so it's this one, 3/4 by 16 TPI. And now let's look over at the lathe and I'll show you how to measure that. Okay, so this is obviously the thread we're going to mount it to. Now the first thing you have to measure is, I'm doing this in inches. Okay, so it's 0.73. Okay, so that's 3/4 of an inch. So that's your 3/4. And now the TPI, what you do is you measure an inch. Now obviously this is not an inch long. So you can do it by halves, you can do 1/2 inch and then count them and then just double it up. But in theory, you measure an inch and then you count how many threads there are. Okay, in my case, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Okay, it's 16 threads. Okay, so it's 3/4 by 16. So we need an adapter for that, which is what we've got here. Okay, so let's quickly get this out of packaging. Now again, this is covered in oil to protect it. Oh, it's very slippery. Okay, we'll give that a quick wipe. So you can see here it's got an internal thread which ties up with the lathe. Okay, very well engineered, and that goes on there nicely. And then you've got the outside thread, which obviously screws into the chuck. Okay, now that is nice, I like that, it's very well machined. Okay, now you've got to tighten this up, and that's where this spanner comes in. Okay, so you literally use that spanner that hooks in one of these locating eyes, use the right end. Okay, and then you give it a turn. Okay, so that's tight, but you've also got the grub screw I mentioned earlier on. Okay, so that's this little fella. Okay, and it also comes with this little leather pad. Now I'm going to try and film this, but what you have to do is you put the pad in first, then put the grub screw in, and that protects the thread on the adapter. So let me see if I can get that in the hole. Okay, this is probably going to be a bit tricky to film, but what you have to do is first of all take your little leather pad and drop it in the hole. You can see through this access hole here, which is handy. Okay, and then try and push it into the hole. Use the Allen key. Right, after a lot of messing about, I finally managed to get that little tiny leather piece into the grub screw hole there. Just persevere with it. It's not difficult, it's just a little bit fiddly. Okay, and then what you have to do is take your small grub screw. Easiest way is probably to put it on the end of your Allen key, insert it through the hole, into the thread. Okay, and you can keep an eye on it through this access hole here and tighten it down. Okay, again, doesn't need to be super tight, okay, but enough to press the leather onto the adapter. Okay, so that adapter is now tight with the thread, but it's also got the grub screw to stop it coming undone. Right, so the next step is just to screw it onto the lathe. Okay, so there's nothing special about screwing it onto the lathe, nothing you wouldn't have done before if you've got a lathe, but that's literally just screws on. We know it fits because we've already tried it once. Okay, until that's home, then using your spanner again, you can just give that a bit of a nip. Let's try and get around here so I can get into it. Now obviously you've got to hold your spindle, locate, use the right end, and tighten it. Okay, so that is now ready to rock and roll. Now the first time you spin it up, be careful because there is quite a bit of oil in it. Now I suspect it's probably going to try and throw some of that oil back at me. Okay, so let's give it a quick spin and see if we get splattered with oil. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it, but there is actually oil splattering about. Okay, excellent. Just to quickly demonstrate the use of this faceplate here. Now this obviously mounts directly onto the chuck, but you've got to mount this onto your workpiece. Now I'll just quickly show you this. Literally screw 4 screws in. Okay, so you've got your 4 screws mounted in there, the faceplate's on there, and just mount this directly to the chuck. Okay, faceplate goes straight in the chuck, and then you actually open it, which then makes the jaws grip the workpiece. Okay, you've got 2 tightening points. Okay, then it's mounted solidly on the chuck. Excellent. Let's have a look at the worm screw. Okay, so to mount it using the worm screw, what we're going to do is quickly find the centre of your workpiece. I'm using my Frank's Little Workshop pencil. Find the centre of the workpiece and then drill a hole in there big enough to accept this thread. Okay, and then all you do is you screw that into the hole. If you can. Okay, now this has got flats on it, so you can actually put it in with a spanner or something if you can. Just one thing. Okay, this is ideal if you're turning a bowl. Okay, you can put this in the waste side, and then you're mounted. And then to mount this into the chuck, you put it straight into the chuck, and then this time you tighten it up. Okay, tighten that. Tighten that. You don't need to over tighten it, just make sure it's secure. Okay, so that is now mounted. Okay, and then you can obviously turn that and then remove it afterwards. I like this system, it's really excellent. Okay, so just quickly whip this back off the lathe now, just to show you how big this actually is. Now these are the jaws that come with it. Now these are called the standard 50mm jaws. Okay, and as you can see, with it fully closed. It's 50mm to the outside edge. Okay, and the overall size of the body is about 100mm. Okay, so that's probably why it's called an SC4. 4 inches maybe? I don't know. Right, I think that's about it. Right, so that's about it. Now that's a quick look at the Record Power SC4 chuck. I think this is going to be fantastic. As I say, it's going to replace this little fella, which I'll keep for doing smaller items. But this one will probably fit more of what I do on a day-to-day basis. Now, obviously, as I said, this now doesn't fit in the box, but it's a nice little box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a big red cross on this and use that as my workshop first aid kit. Okay, right, that's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. I would like to talk about it. Let's start that one again because that was rubbish.